This painting hung in a dining room, not in a palace, not in a church, in a private house, on the outskirts of Madrid. A man sat down to eat his meals in front of this image. Every single day. No one else was allowed to see it. No one else knew it existed. The man who painted it was Francisco Goya. And what you're looking at is possibly the most disturbing image ever created in the history of Western art. The question isn't what he painted. The question is why he needed to. Francisco Goya was born in 1746 in a small village in Aragon, Spain. He rose from nothing, the son of a gilder, a lower middle-class family in a poor region. But Goya had something that opened doors. By his 40s, he was the official court painter to the Spanish crown. He painted kings in silk, queens covered in gold, men who believed their empire would last forever. He loved music. He loved conversation. He was, by all accounts, a joyful and sociable man. That man would not survive what came next. In 1792, Goya fell ill. The exact cause has never been confirmed. Lead poisoning, syphilis, a stroke. Doctors have debated it for 200 years. What is certain is this: he lost his hearing completely at the age of 46. For a man who loved music and conversation, the world went silent, permanently. He was forced to resign his teaching post. He withdrew from public life. He began painting things no one had asked him to paint. Lunatics in a courtyard, bodies in the mud, monsters emerging from sleep. His darkness had found a language. Then came Napoleon. In 1808, French troops invaded Spain. Goya witnessed the massacres. He saw what soldiers do to civilians when no one is watching. He painted it. The 3rd of May, 1808. A man with his arms open, facing a firing squad. It would become one of the most powerful anti-war images ever made. But Goya kept it hidden for years, because Spain had a new king, Ferdinand VII. And Ferdinand VII was not a man who tolerated dissent. He abolished the constitution. He imprisoned, exiled, or executed anyone who had dared to believe in a different Spain. Many of Goya's closest friends disappeared, arrested, exiled, killed. Goya survived, but something in him did not. In 1819, Goya was 73 years old, deaf, isolated, disillusioned. He bought a house on the outskirts of Madrid, on the banks of the Manzanares River. The house would become known as Quinta del Sordo, the Villa of the Deaf Man, a name that felt less like a title and more like a diagnosis. He lived there almost alone, with his companion, Leocadia, and the silence he had carried for 30 years. And then he began to paint the walls. Room by room, the walls began to rot into nightmares. 14 paintings, painted directly onto the plaster. No canvas, no frame, no signature, not for sale, not for exhibition, not for anyone. Saturn, devouring his son, was on the lower floor. In the dining room, the figure emerges from total darkness. His eyes are wide, not with hunger, with terror. His knuckles are white. His grip is desperate, as if he cannot stop himself, as if he knows what he is doing and cannot stop. The victim is not a child. Look carefully. The body is adult. And if you look closer at the hips and the contours of the torso, it appears to be a female body, a detail that completely contradicts the title history gave to this masterpiece. This is a grown son, or perhaps a daughter, someone who had already lived, someone who could feel what was happening. The head is already gone. The mouth opens around the arm. Blood runs down in a single, precise stroke of red. Goya ate his meals here, every morning, every evening, alone, in front of this. Here is what most people miss. The myth says Saturn devoured his children because he feared they would overthrow him, not out of cruelty, out of fear. Goya knew that fear. He had watched a king destroy an entire generation of thinkers to protect his own power. Ferdinand VII didn't massacre people out of strength. He did it out of terror. The terror of a ruler who knows the future does not belong to him. Saturn is not a god in this painting. Saturn is a government. Saturn is any system that consumes its own future to survive one more day. Goya could never say this out loud, so he painted it on his wall, in a room where no one could see, in a house with no witnesses, and he sat with it every day, because some truths are too dangerous to speak and too heavy to forget. In 1823, the political situation in Spain collapsed again. Ferdinand VII returned to absolute power. The reprisals were brutal. Goya was 78 years old, deaf, partially paralyzed after a second stroke, and afraid. He transferred the house to his grandson to protect it from the regime. And then he left Spain. He told the authorities he needed to take the waters in France. For his health, he never came back. He settled in Bordeaux, with Leocadia, with Exile, with a company of other Spaniards who had also been swallowed by the same king. He continued to paint until he could not. Francisco Goya died on April 16th, 1828, in a foreign city at the age of 82. The paintings on the walls of the Quinta del Sordo were still there, waiting in silence. 45 years after Goya died, a French banker named Baron d'Erlanger purchased the Quinta del Sordo. He found the paintings. He had them transferred from the plaster walls to canvas. The process damaged them. Details were lost forever. What hangs in the Prado today is not exactly what Goya painted. It is a damaged copy of a private confession. The world was never supposed to see this. And yet, here we are. Millions of people have stood in front of Saturn devouring his son. Most of them look at a monster. But Goya wasn't painting a monster. He was painting a mirror. A government that devours its future to survive its present. A man who destroys what he loves most because he cannot bear the thought of being replaced. You don't have to look far to find that story today. The painting watched. It still watches. It never stopped. Most people look at paintings. Very few actually see them. If this one stayed with you, subscribe to Inside the Artwork, because the next painting has a story just as dark and just as real.